Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched Way to Go, far and away the best documentary I've seen about a toilet in quite some time, if ever. Joining us is the director of Way to Go, Kathy Roselli. Hello, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kurt. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate that.
So, the obvious question to start is how did the decision to make a film about a remote toilet on a mountain come about?
Well, I have some dear friends from Mount Shasta. I lived in Mount Shasta actually for 18 years before moving to Ashland. And a couple of my friends were in line with me at the Ashland Film Festival. And I said, I need to make a film about the mountains someday. And one of my friends, BB, said, well, you should make a film about the composting toilet on Mount Shasta. And I'm like, really? The composting toilet on Mount Shasta? And then, they were talking about how it's a unique opportunity to use a toilet at basically 7,900 feet when you're getting ready to climb on the mountain. So I said, well, let me sleep on that. And if I get a title coming to me, maybe I'll do it. And wouldn't you know it, the next morning I woke up and Way to Go just kind of downloaded into my brain. And I thought, okay, I will do this film. So that's
Well,
literally how it started.
you're a filmmaker by trade, not a commode expert per se, but I assume that in the wake of making this film, you've been bombarded with all kinds of fascinating poop related questions. Am I right?
You are absolutely right. In fact, I've heard all kinds of, shall we say, puns that are not for family hearing, but that's okay. It's still an important topic because the process of managing our human waste is a big problem all over the world. And so ultimately, telling the story of the Mount Shasta toilet in particular was a way to shine a light on that problem and how important it is, especially in the wilderness, to leave no trace.
Was this a one person production or did you have a team behind you?
I did have a team behind me. Usually it's just me and my awesome editor, Pat Summers. We've been doing most of the work on the films that I've been doing lately. And this time, realizing that I was going to be shooting up at a couple miles off the road on Mount Shasta, I decided to hire a film crew. And so it was fun because I had known the gentleman who was in charge of the film crew. Pusher is their name. They're in Dunsmuir, California. Um, the key person there, Bryce Craig, was a friend of mine as a teenager. And then so it was fun to be able to hire him and get him and his coworker up on the mountain with me to do the shooting and the audio capture. So that was pretty cool.
What's been your favorite part of Way to Go? You know, that title has such playful wordplay. It really sets the tone for a film that's clearly very tongue in cheek, not taking itself too seriously. And everyone who appears in the film is smiling, which shows that people are having a lot of fun with just the very concept of the production. I mean, can you really even make a serious dramatic film about a toilet?
I don't know, honestly. I feel like the topic is a bit quirky, so I wanted the film to reflect that. But ultimately, it does have that serious message. If you once you see the film end, you realize that composting toilets at altitude is probably not the key way to manage human waste in the wilderness. It's really packing out your own poop, basically. And the other piece of this that I think was so amazing is that so many people in the Mount Shasta community put volunteer time into keeping this toilet running, especially a couple of friends of mine, Rick Chitwood, who calls himself the senior toilet engineer, and his wife, Linda Chitwood, who is responsible for the volunteers at Horse Camp and make sure that the toilet is maintained, you know, the grounds are maintained around the toilet, basically. So it's a community effort. And I think it was also eye opening for a lot of folks that live in the Mount Shasta region that they just didn't realize that all of this was happening on their mountain. And it's on Sierra Foundation land, and Sierra Foundation actually owns 720 acres. is in the wilderness, which is a unique situation. There's very little private land um, in the wilderness, so it's kind of a cool story. All those elements came in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And your film certainly goes beyond just profiling the toilet itself. It really showcases the dedicated volunteers who keep it operational, and it really is a loving tribute to individuals everywhere that volunteer to keep public facilities operating, be it public settings or in this case an actual public facility. Uh, do do you volunteer anywhere as well? Because it really does come across to me as a very loving tribute to people who do that kind of work, dedicating their lives to such endeavors.
Well, I volunteer by creating films about people like that. How's that? At this stage of my life, yeah, that was important to me to honor the people that do this for the enjoyment, really, of all kinds of folks from, because the Mount Shasta draws people from all over the world.
Mhm. So, what do you hope that people get out of your home? Uh, uh, sorry, out of let, let me do take two on that. What do you hope people get out of your film? Perhaps inspire a trip to Mount Shasta, or maybe just think a little bit harder about what goes into keeping public places in shape.
Well, I think certainly a lot of people get inspired to go to Mount Shasta already. So it'll be interesting to see if the film inspires more people to go. There's a pun. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is, there's quite a bit of history of the Sierra Foundation and the horse camp, and so one of the things we had is this cool brochure that goes along with the film that uh, now there will be many copies of it at horse camp at the Sierra Foundation hut, because we were going to give those out at film festivals. And in fact, I could probably send you a few if you like. And if, when people are in the audience watching the film live, they could take home a brochure that tells them a lot more about the whole process, and the Sierra Club Foundation, and really leaving no trace. I think ultimately that is the message that I want to leave people with, is that clean up your own mess, basically.
That's fantastic. So, did working on this project make you want to delve deeper into how things function in other realms? Because there can be some amazing stories that can come from what we take as just being the average, mundane, everyday thing, and you don't think about how does that actually work? How does that function? It's just here's a toilet, I need to go there. You don't really think
Right.
about all that goes into that process.
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that question, because I feel like that's been the inspiration for many of the films I've made in the past. I like looking at everyday processes and going deeper. So, for example, I did a film about breath. We breathe and don't even think about it. And there's a lot more to breath than meets the eye. And the same with about aging. I mean, we're all aging, and yet we don't necessarily think about it. So I did a film about old. So I feel like the question you just asked is really ultimately what inspires me as a filmmaker, is to look at things that we don't necessarily, look a little deeper at things that we don't necessarily think about.
You operate K Rose Productions. So, in
Right.
addition to Way to Go and the films that you just talked about, are there any new projects in the future that we can expect?
Well, I am indeed working on a project COVID related, and that is providing food to food insecure families in the Rogue Valley. And I want to continue to, you know, I never have a dearth of ideas, so I'm always looking for the next thing. And the other thing is, I too have taken some time to get some new gear, and I'm really excited about getting a macro lens. And so now I want to tell a story about something tiny. That might be my next film after the food film.
Well,
Stay tuned.
your film has brought a lot of smiles to people. Our judges loved this film, and there were a lot of puns that came out. One referred to it as the Citizen Kane of
New one.
filmmaking. What were some of the other enjoyable things and feedback that you've received from this film?
Honestly, I can't remember the puns. I did, uh, I did have the opportunity to see the film in a theater before we all got shut down, and what I can say is that people laughed a lot, and they did come up to me, and really the message is you made a fun film to tell an important message, and that was very gratifying.
Fantastic. Um, in the process of filmmaking, there's always things that happen where sometimes the behind the scenes is more fun than what ends up in the finished project. Were there any bloopers or funny, memorable moments involved in the production of Way to Go?
That's an interesting question. It was all very everything happened had to happen quickly. Interviewing random people on the mountain about their experience when they came out of the toilet. It's like, And then when we had the kids on the mountain, they had a specific timeline, and so we didn't have much time with them. So I would say that it was just another example of really being able to respond quickly to try to capture the moment, and that's always a challenge for any documentary filmmaker.
Well, and speaking of challenges, this isn't the easiest of locations to access to shoot at. So, did that bring some hardships as well, just trying to get there?
Well, it didn't really because I'm a hiker, and I really love getting on Mount Shasta. We did do one shoot in the snow, which was really fun. But I did opt, as I mentioned earlier, I opted not to take all the heavy gear, and that's why I hired a crew. So that was really an important part of it for me. So I learned more about what it means to be a director in a sense, because when I do my own films, I'm basically directing my own shoot, but working with other folks, I think I really needed to learn more about being very, very specific. But I think we captured what I was hoping to. So I'm very pleased. And I also, like I said, I work closely with my editor, and Pat and I think pulled it together in a fun way. So I'm really and I also have music from Mount Shasta musicians. So it really is kind of an ode to Mount Shasta, where I lived, as I said, 18 years, and was one of my favorite places ever to live.
I am really curious about trying to coordinate the interviews with people. Did you just shove a camera in people's face as soon as they come out of the bathroom and they're like, "What is going on?" Or did you ask them before they go in? Do you mind appearing on camera afterwards? Or what was the different reactions that you got from people? Because I would be very confused if someone said, "Hey, do you mind if I film you and interview you about your experience as soon as soon as you use the toilet?"
Well, that's an interesting question. So the one gentleman that I think is so great, we honestly just said, "Hey, we're doing a film about the toilet, and you just used it. Would you be willing to talk about it?" And he was just like, "Yeah." And so he was great. And then the the one shot, I actually knew a woman from having met her the year before that had done the breast cancer climb, and I asked her in advance if she would be um, willing to be on camera, and she said yes. So with the breast cancer climb, we actually talked to them in advance and said that we were doing this and we would be looking for volunteers. And the same with the school kids, we had to get permission in advance from the teachers to film. So there was some knowledge in advance for those two groups, but the one gentleman there was indeed just had just used the toilet and was more than willing to talk about it because he thought it was so cool.
Any final thoughts on Way to Go, or what you hope people get out of the experience of seeing Way to Go?
Well, I hope that when they hear that term again, it will have a double meaning for them. I know I use it somewhat cautiously when I'm telling my friends, like giving them kudos, and that it does remind them to really, honor the wilderness, like I said, clean up after themselves. I think that's important for all of us, no matter where we are, whether it's poop or whether it's paper or trash, right? We want to keep
Absolutely.
we want to keep our world as pristine as we possibly can.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for bringing some levity to the Klamath Independent Film Festival. And in addition to being available online through Eventive, people can catch Way to Go in person at the Ross Raglan Theater here in Klamath Falls on Sunday, September 20th at 1:20 p.m. for the 8th Annual Klamath Independent Film Festival. So thank you very much, Kathy, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kurt.